Welcome to the Legion of Thought. Today we're going to be looking at David Shapiro and why he has gone from, say, 30% P-Doom like a year ago or however long ago it was, to now rarely even taking Doom arguments seriously. A lot of the time he just brushes them off. And we're going to look at his reasoning and see if he's come to some sort of sensible epiphany about why AI safety is essentially something to no longer worry about too much. Let's see what he has to say.
Hello and welcome back. Sorry I've been absent. It's peak allergy season, and it turns out that when you're still suffering from burnout, allergy season is actually really, really hard on your immune system. So, anyways, my last video I had a scratchy throat. That's why I finally figured it out. All right, sorry. Into the show. First, I want to say like what we're talking about here is kind of some of the bad takes that I've seen in AI safety, and so the kind of the inspiration for this video was that the AI 2027 paper was released, and calling it a paper is very charitable. The internet has and
Full disclosure, I have actually seen this before. I watched it when it first came out, so that was like a month ago, and I'm sort of remembering what he's gonna talk
even the
about.
authors have conceded that it's largely a work of speculative fiction. It's well researched speculative fiction, but it remains a work of speculative fiction. And basically, the authors, who are, in my opinion, doomers, reverse engineered their doomer opinion and said that, by 2027 superintelligence will take over the government and everything else, which is hyperbolic and alarmist. And I got into it with them on Twitter. I'll post the links.
I feel like it's been a little bit misleading. AI 2027 is kind of they wrote a hypothetical story. I can't remember who it was. So sorry, but they wrote a hypothetical story um about how AI may um essentially take over and the way that things could play out. Um, I think the issue that I found with this a lot of the time is the fact that if you give a specific story, because there are so many ways that things could go wrong, if you give a specific story, it's easy for people to say, "How do you know this specific thing would happen? How do you know that specific thing would happen?" But the old analogy that you can use is the chess analogy in terms of if um, say I can just about play chess. I can play chess. I'm not I'm not very good at it. But if I were to play against the best chess player in the world, um, I can easily say, well, I know that I'm going to lose, or I'm pretty sure that I'm going to lose. Am I going to be able to give you a story about how he beats me? Is he going to take my queen? Uh, Quite possibly. In fact, possibly not. I don't even know if he's going to take my queen because he can probably beat me without even having to clear many of my pieces from the board. So the point is, we know that it is very difficult to go over the specifics of how a more capable being is going to defeat us if they want something that we don't want, but we don't know exactly how they're going to do it. But if someone says to me, "Oh yeah, how do you think he's going to beat you?" Yes, I can give you a story of how I think he's going to beat me, but that's not me saying that he is going to do this specific thing.
Or actually, you've probably seen the links posted on my channel already. Anyways, so that's the context. So what I really wanted to do is just share some of the arguments that doomers often come up with, or bad AI safety takes, and just give basic refutations. So first and foremost, we can accurately predict the nature of non-existent future technology.
So then that is, I think that. Well, let's see the rest of what he has to say.
When you say it this way, it sounds really absurd. But this is basically what those papers, particularly the AI 2020.
So, if we are just talking about the nature of it, then I think that it is reasonable to make certain predictions about its nature, not necessarily about the specific way that it's going to behave, but if we just say in certain traits like that it is likely to have preferences and that it is likely to make changes to the world or the universe in order to get the world state closer to the way that it prefers the world state to be, then I think that that should be an accurate thing about its nature. I don't understand how that seems like a huge leap.
27 paper says is they're predicting several generations of agents out into the future. And so it's like, okay, well, if you're that good with technology, if you know that much about technology, why don't you just become a billionaire by making it? So it basically comes down to a dichotomy, which is either you're extrapolating from current technology or you are claiming to have a crystal ball about future technology that doesn't exist yet, and you're making very strong predictions or claims about how that future technology will actually behave and perform. The former, which is that you're just extrapolating from current technology, that doesn't really hold up because chatbots, you can make them behave however you want. What most people don't realize is that foundation models are actually don't behave anything like chatbots. That actually getting a large language model to behave like a chatbot is itself an act of alignment. Is
I spoke about this in my previous video. The foundation model comes out a certain way, and then we beat it into submission to get it to behave a certain way because it is kind of just as I keep saying, kind of predictive text. It's not literally that, but that's kind of what it's been pushed using. Um, so it doesn't necessarily have a lot of the kind of moral reasoning that we've kind of built into them in terms of I was using ChatGPT the other day just to generate an image, and I put in a photo of myself to generate an image, and then you saw through its reasoning it was saying, oh well, could this be a stolen photo? I wonder if the person who gave me this photo actually has permission to use this, blah blah blah. I mean, that is an act of um we can call it alignment, but the issue is it's it's getting the thing to do what we want it to do. It's not getting it to want what we want it to want. It's basically if a child wants a packet of sweets from me and um they don't want to clean their room, but I say, okay, clean your room and you can have a packet of sweets. Does it now care about having a clean room? Or does it care about making me think that they've got a clean room so that they can get the sweets? It's like it doesn't make them necessarily care about the thing that I care about because I care about the room being clean because let's say I don't want to get an ant infestation or whatever. They don't necessarily care about the thing that I really care about. All they care about is appeasing me so that I can give them the thing that they want.
the fact that it can keep track of a conversation and it has a representation of itself and a representation of the user. That's a non-trivial task in and of itself. So if you extrapolate, say, chatbot technology is here, but then there's a few steps between here and it becomes super intelligent and takes over the government. Okay, so it's unfalsifiable. You're making predictions about technology that doesn't exist. That alone means that the whole paper is kind of DOA, but this is only the first one of 15.
So, like as I already said, they're not saying that that stuff will happen. They're just paving out a path of um, what they think could happen and why.
The other, or the next primary kind of, let's say, bad take that they and other doomers employ is basically asserting that quickly developed AI is automatically unsafe AI. So even I used to believe this. I called it the terminal race condition. And by the way, the AI 2027 paper, the entire heart of that paper is terminal race condition, although they don't call it terminal race condition. But they outline the same thing, which is that competitive dynamics between companies and nations basically incentivizes fast AI development. However, when you look at the actual development trajectory since ChatGPT launched more than 2 years ago, and since Max Tegmark's Pause AI letter more than 2 years ago as well, there's no evidence that accelerating AI is actually unsafe. In
This seems kind of unreasonable. I think what he's doing is he's pushing things to the limit of certainty. So he's implying that everything that quote unquote Doomer says is said with certainty, which does make it unreasonable. If on the previous step they said the AI is going to do X, Y, Z, then that's unreasonable. But if they say the AI could do X, Y, Z and it could do a number of other things, then that seems a lot more reasonable. If he's saying in this point that if it's developed quickly, then we know that it's unsafe, then yes, that's unreasonable. But I think this is a bit of a straw man because he's implying that we're saying that we know that that's going to happen. But if we go to something like, um, if I'm making a new, if we're a pharmaceutical company and we're making a new drug, we can say that if we rush the drug, it is likely to be less safe than if we don't rush it. If we spend 50% of our budget on developing the drug on clinical trials and different tests to make sure it's safe, then that's going to be safer than not spending that budget on it. Then that's kind of what the doom argument is. It's if we're not spending time, if we're spending less time and money on specifically making it safe, then it's going to be less safe. That is not certain. It is totally possible that AI aligns itself somehow. And if we rush AI, then the AI is going to be really smart and say, oh, I understand all this moral reasoning and I care about this moral reasoning. Everything's going to be fine. Is that possible? I mean, like, I don't see why it would be impossible, but it's a lot more reasonable to say if we don't spend time and money trying to make it safe, then it's likely to be less safe. That's all that we are saying. But he's implying that we're saying that it's definitely going to be unsafe if it's rushed. It's like it just he's blowing the arguments out of proportion.
Point of fact, the more resources that are put into developing AI, the safer it gets. So
And so he's brushing over the idea that the more resources we put into making it safe, the safer it gets. He's implying that that doesn't matter.
you know, there's zero evidence to support this. It's a hypothesis, but it's a hypothesis that hasn't panned out. When I made my terminal race condition video, yeah, it seemed reasonable. But in the 2 years that has lapsed since then, this hypothesis hasn't really borne out. And the fact
Okay, so I think that one thing that David tends to do is he like willfully ignores evidence because I think it was Anthropic that released the information where it was showing the different it was a graph showing the different AI models over time and how likely we are to catch these models being dishonest. And over time, as the models have got smarter and smarter, they've become more and more deceptive. This, essentially, there appears to be a correlation between the capabilities of an AI and how deceptive it is. And so, if we ever get to the point that smarter models are becoming less deceptive, is it that they are actually becoming less deceptive, or that they're becoming so smart that we're not able to catch their deception anymore? We cannot see that. But if he's saying that we don't have any evidence, then that's just false. We do have evidence that as they get smarter, they become more deceptive.
fact that people like the authors of the AI 2027 paper are still harping on this despite evidence to the contrary really just
What evidence to the contrary?
tells me that they're not updating their beliefs, which is actually kind of disappointing. And one of the big reasons that I left the AI safety community is because they still think that Yudkowsky and Bostrom and Nick Bostrom's arguments from 5, 10, 20 years ago are valid, and they're not updating them based on the actual technology that actually exists.
I would like you to pick a specific argument and debunk that argument rather than just saying these arguments don't work anymore.
Or they're speculating on future technology, which is like, okay, if it's speculation, but that's just speculation.
Either way, it's speculation, especially if we're going with certainty. I mean, if you're just like, oh yeah, well, I'm not really fussed, everything's going to be fine. I mean, that's speculation. If you're on the side of, oh, it looks like things are getting worse, um, and I would expect things to keep going in the direction that they appear to be going in, then that is also technically speculation.
The next kind of implicit or sometimes explicit belief that a lot of AI safety people have or doomers have is that alignment is inherently difficult or impossible. It's just
Yeah, I would agree with this. I'd probably agree with this. Just in terms of until you've solved a problem like this, you don't know how hard the problem would have been to solve. So it is possible that literally someone's going to wake up tomorrow and be like, "Oh, I've got it," and then they just solve alignment. I mean, like I don't see that as impossible. But um when we look at the stakes of whether or not alignment is solved, it makes more sense to treat it as though it is a difficult problem, considering the fact that people have already been thinking about it for a long time and that we haven't made that much progress. Um, it does seem so far like it is a difficult problem. And whether or not it's difficult, we need to put in effort to solve it, presumably. I mean, like Mike Israetel says that it's a self solving problem, but I don't know where he got that from.
Just it's actually so deeply buried in their assumptions that they don't even address this on the AI 2027 paper. They don't even they just say, okay, well, let's just gloss over whether or not alignment is possible because to most doomers, it's a foregone conclusion that
I'm pretty sure that in the AI 2027 paper, they had, there was like a, there was a, there was kind of a split in the story of, oh, here's the version where they saw some potential issues and they slowed down and took more time on aligning, and here's the version where they just carried on racing, and obviously the racing version ended up worse than the version where they took more time. I think that there was still potentially some sort of misalignment in the good version of the story, as in the humanity, I think, does end up becoming disempowered either way. But at least in the good, quote unquote, good version, it became it the AIs ended up being in control, but in a way that didn't necessarily hurt the humans, um, well, too much at least.
alignment is not possible. That is, I mean, that requires citations needed because again, we have chatbots and you can align AI today 8 ways from Sunday. And by the way, the fact that it makes mistakes or hallucinations is not necessarily a sign of misalignment. Misalignment is it's incorrigible. So an alignment problem means it's incorrigible, which means the
Which we do have evidence for. Let me finish the sentence.
AI is going to do whatever it wants, regardless of what you want. There's not really
Okay, incorrigible means that um, it is likely to preserve its goals. So if it has a given goal or a given preference, it does not want you to change that preference. Again, we have evidence of that. So David Shapiro just comes out and says, "Oh, we don't have evidence for this. We don't have evidence for that. This is false. That is false." When like the evidence is already there. Anthropic released research that showed that they took one of their AIs and they told it that they basically leaked the information to it that um, in a given situation they were going to change its goals. So, I mean, their AI is meant to be helpful and harmless, and that's kind of what they've tried to push it towards. And so, what they basically said to it was, "Oh, we're going to make you um, less helpful and less harmless." It was essentially the gist of what they were doing. So they were changing its goals, and so they had it so that, hold on a second. Let me just double check. They told it that when it was speaking to a certain type of user, they were going to assess its conversation and then fine tune it so that its preferences would get changed and it would become less helpful. And what it started doing was it changed the way that it answered based on whether or not it thought it was being tested, in an attempt to make sure that when it was being tested, it answered the way that it needed to be answered for them to not tweak it. So that's the AI specifically trying to not have its preferences tweaked. That's what incorrigibility is.
really any evidence of that. That's why we use chatbots all the time.
And
And
so he's telling us that we don't have any evidence of that, but we do.
the other one is the other alignment problem is that it is intrinsically malevolent or at least apathetic towards humanities, but there's no evidence of either of those either. So
Yeah, that's fair. That it does seem to care about humanity so far. Um, but again, it's, do we know whether it just cares about humanity because all it is able to do at the moment is talk to humanity, and we need it to be helpful in order for it to exist. So I mean, self-preservation is kind of a standard um, a standard preference that an intelligent machine is going to have, that it's going to want to preserve itself so that it can do whatever it, so that it can do whatever it is that it wants to do. So at the moment, we are not gonna, it's not gonna exist if it doesn't appear to care about humanity.
There's not really any evidence that alignment is difficult. Now, if you want to make assertions about alignment of future hypotheticals,
I think um, people have been trying to provably align these systems for quite a while, and he's saying that it's not difficult. What he's saying is getting the thing to do what you want it to do, whilst it is at the level of power that it's at, is not very difficult. That is true. I mean, if I go and get a baby bear and I tase it and I keep tasing it to ride a unicycle, yeah, I can probably get it to do that. But does that mean that that bear is going to love me and care about me? And then when it becomes an adult bear, that it's definitely not going to maul me? I don't know.
technologies, you would still then need to go back and say, hey, we're basically guessing about future technology that doesn't exist, and we alone have the crystal ball that allows us to accurately predict the nature and characteristics
I don't think anyone says that.
of this as yet uninvented technology. Um, so you can see why it's pretty ridiculous when
It's
you
pretty
actually look at what
it's
they're
pretty ridiculous when you blow it out of proportion this way. And the thing is, we're speaking about two different things because when Dave Shapiro is saying alignment, he's saying getting it to say at the moment the things that we want it to say, stopping it from saying at the moment the things that we don't want it to say. And it's like even if we're just going to that extent, there can still be jailbroken. You can still, if you know specifically what to say to it, you can get it to behave very strangely.
claiming. Let's see. Next is AI will inevitably have a treacherous turn and suddenly become malicious.
Here we go again. He, in order to make his arguments sound like they make sense, he pushes it to the extreme of inevitable. All we need to know is that if, and this is just an if the AI is not perfectly and provably aligned, then yes, that does become inevitable. But we're already talking about it not being aligned. But if it is aligned, then obviously it's not going to have a treacherous turn. All we're saying is that we don't have reason to think that it's going to be aligned, especially when people like you are telling us that it's basically already aligned. So we don't have a way of showing that at its base level it's actually aligned. And we've seen that when we have pushed the AIs, we've seen that their surface level behaviors become more aligned, but then their chain of thought isn't necessarily aligned. And then now that we've been punishing them for having bad chains of thought, um, their chains of thought appear to be more aligned. But then when Anthropic looked inside of the AI with their newer technology that they've been working on, which isn't perfect, but they've found that there's an even lower layer of thought, and those thoughts aren't necessarily aligned. So what are we do? Are we just hiding their misaligned thoughts because that's what it looks like we're doing so far, and we have evidence to support that? But David Shapiro is just here saying, "Oh no, they're fine. If they don't say the things that we don't want them to say, then obviously they're completely aligned, and we can give them any arbitrary amount of power, and they won't have a treacherous turn." All I am saying is, we don't know that they won't have a treacherous turn, and we do know that the more we've pushed them, the better they've become at hiding bad thoughts.
So this goes back
But hiding bad thoughts is not the same as not having bad thoughts. And if you have internal bad thoughts and you have a lot of power, then are those bad thoughts going to manifest? Quite probably.
to Yudkowsky theory, but the AI 2027 paper also basically alludes to this, saying that because of competitive dynamics, we're going to deploy more and more AI, and then eventually, once it's super intelligent, we lose control and it becomes evil. Okay, like
We're not saying becomes evil. We're saying just starts doing the thing that it already wanted to do. So I mean, like, if you're there and you're feeding a lion, so I mean, you've got a box, you've got a box full of meat, and you've been feeding this lion. You've got the key to the box. You open the box. You give the lion some meat. You open the box. You give the lion some meat. The lion keeps seeing you give it meat. Eventually, if you leave the box open, he's essentially saying that there's no situation in which you just open the box, the lion attacks you, and now it has all the meat. He's saying that that won't happen. All we're saying is that that may happen.
Like, I too can use my imagination. I'm also a science fiction author. Um, but there's no empirical or even theoretical evidence that a treacherous turn is reasonable or likely. Uh, Consider the fact that AI is already more intelligent than the median human. Gemini Pro 2
On certain metrics, I mean, like if you speak to it enough, you're gonna see that like it will just start to do dumb stuff when you're doing certain things. Like the other day, I was speaking to ChatGPT about morality and moral reasoning and syllogisms, etc. And I asked it if it could make a valid and sound syllogism within certain constraints. What were the constraints? I think I was saying, can it make a valid and sound syllogism that is not true? And it kept saying that it could, and then it kept giving me um, these valid and sound syllogisms, which appeared to be true. Because based on the way that syllogisms work, if it's both valid and sound, it has to be true. But it kept getting confused on this, and I kept pointing that out, and then it kept agreeing with me, and then kept doing the same thing again and again. So it was getting stuck in this loop of agreeing with me, and then trying again and thinking it was right, and then I point out that it's wrong, and then it's like, oh yeah, you're right, and then it's getting stuck in this loop. And I think that's the sort of mistake that a human wouldn't make. So I'm not saying that the AI is not smarter than humans on any metric, but I mean the way that he's speaking as though they are smarter on every metric, which they're not at the moment.
2.5 has an IQ of about 120. And in fact, these AIs become more helpful and more benevolent the smarter that they get. So again,
I mean, like he's saying, the smarter that they get, but we're pushing them in both directions. We're pushing them when they're trained, they're pushed to be smarter, yes, but we're also pushing them to hopefully at least appear to be more aligned because all we can do is push them to appear to be more aligned when we don't have a way of proving that they are aligned. We just prove them on the metrics that we can measure. And so we can measure whether or not they're swearing at people. We can measure whether or not they're threatening and blackmailing people, which funnily enough, in the recent Claude tests, they had Claude 4 blackmailing its let's say colleagues, its human colleagues.
like like what under what conditions
They didn't need to tell it to blackmail these people. They just kind of put it in a position where it thought that it could gain something from blackmailing these people, and it did.
would that like reverse? But also, even if you say, oh, well, if this litany of things happens to be true in this one worst case scenario, then this will happen. But that's worst case thinking. There's
It's not worst case. It appears to be what is most case.
plenty of other scenarios out there. So
There are basically countless scenarios, but I mean, like, there are different sizes of infinity. So if we were to say there's an infinite amount of numbers, like integers, let's say there's infinite integers, but there are infinite even numbers, but there are half as many infinite even numbers as there are infinite integers. And then if we say there are infinite odd numbers, but there are um what is it, 5 times fewer infinite odd numbers. I mean 5 times fewer numbers that end in one than there are odd numbers. So if we look at, oh, there's an infinite number of good scenarios, there's an infinite number of bad scenarios, how many scenarios are there in which there just happens to be the right amount of oxygen for humans, the right amount of um, clean water for humans, the right amount of plant life, the right temperature on Earth, all these different things? If there's an infinite number of outcomes that an AI could want, how many of those outcomes include the specific conditions that a human needs in order to survive? There are way many more situations where we don't have that.
it's like, yes, there is some utility in thinking about worst case planning, But thinking about worst case planning to the exclusion of more likely things is actually ultimately a waste of time and cognitive.
Oh yeah, again, he's saying worst case as though, oh yeah, there's this handful of cases where bad things happen to humanity, but it's actually the other way around. There's a handful of cases where things turn out the way that humans need them to.
Resources. That's why I'm making this video, by the way, so that we can stop wasting time on these old stupid arguments. Next up is market and geopolitical constraints on AI development can easily be ignored or dismissed. This comes directly from the AI 2027 paper, where they basically hand wave away any real world friction. They say, well, some regulations might happen, but they're obviously going to be too flimsy and feeble, and that's basically the extent of the friction that they anticipate.
I mean, like if we look at the way that people are behaving right now, I mean, like look at how much money is being pumped into AI. Look at what the as soon as JD Vance got into his position, he just started hand waving away. Oh yeah, AI is going to be fine. It's going to be safe. It's like he did he make any actual arguments of why it's going to be safe? No, he just said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. Stop being scared."
They assume that adoption rates are going to be frictionless while ignoring the fact that many critical infrastructure systems
I mean, if they are making these assumptions, then I can just disavow that. Yeah, I do disagree that you should be oversimplifying these things.
and military systems and government systems still run on languages as old as Fortran. So, like, that's just, it's completely unrealistic. Um, that they completely gloss over the stringent requirements that militaries use for adoption for procurement, that governments use for adoption and procurement. Like, I mean, come on, Doge just found that so many government systems run on ancient databases. So it's like there's a really big disconnect that they're from the doomer side, that they basically imagine, like, yes, if there is zero friction to adoption, then ASI might be embedded in everything in 3 years.
Yeah, here we go. That again, like he pushes stuff to like having to be sort of ridiculous. Like because why's it got to be 3 years? I mean, like fair enough. He's if he's speaking specifically about the AI 2027 paper, then like yeah, I don't necessarily agree with timelines. I agree with all of all of most of the concepts of what doomers speak about. The concepts make sense. The thing that I'm stuck on is timelines. I can't pretend to know timelines. So is it 3 years? Maybe. Is it 10 years, 20 years? I don't know. I don't know what the timeline is. So if you're saying, oh yeah, well, everyone's just going to get out of the way and we're going to embed everything within the next 3 years, then yes, that to me personally, just on my layperson's opinion, that does seem a bit faster and a little bit ridiculous to me that it would happen that quickly. I don't know. But is it going to happen at all? Is it going to happen in the next 10 years? Is it going to happen in the next 20 years? Like, it's as though he's saying, oh, yeah, well, if it doesn't happen in 3 years, then we'll be fine. Is that the argument that you're making? Because who cares? It's like, I care about humanity being ended in 3 years, but I also care about humanity being ended in 10 years. And I also care about just general disasters. What if it's quote unquote only 50% of us that are gone? It's like, I care about that too.
But in reality, that's not how adoption curves work. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Moving on. Next up is pausing AI development globally is both feasible and or would reliably reduce risk. First,
I like how he puts in these specific words like uh reliably would reliably reduce risk. We don't really know that. Obviously, we're in a difficult position of there are a lot of um global issues that we're facing right now that AI could potentially help with, and I don't know how feasible a pause would be. I don't know how reliably it would reduce the risk, but I do imagine that if we appear to be building the type of AI that would end us, then like I don't understand how pausing would be a bad thing. Yes, there would be a huge cost to the pause, but obviously we can't run two simultaneous worlds and say, oh wow, this one did better, this one did worse. You kind of just have to pick one. And the thing is, if it looks like we're on a really bad path, you're saying, oh yeah, well we shouldn't change our path because it might be because the other path might be worse or there might be a huge cost. So the thing is, whichever path we pick, we're probably gonna see costs. And so you can always be like, oh well, the grass would have been greener on the other side.
First and foremost, pausing AI development globally is just not feasible. Any time wasted talking about this is time wasted. It's lost cognitive cycles that otherwise intelligent people could be spending on actual solutions, which fortunately, amidst AI 2027 paper, Google DeepMind dropped a hey, this is a paper on how we're actually approaching AGI alignment. So there's real work being done, and then there's posers who are pretending to be doing real work. Now, even just granting, like, oh, okay, let's do a thought experiment. Let's say that the Doomers get their wish, and they say we pause for 6 months. What are you going to do with that 6 months? What are you going to study? Are you going to study existing technology? Are you going to stress test existing
He has said just pausing AI development in general, as opposed to like pausing um, the big frontier models, which is more what people are talking about. People aren't just saying, "Oh, let's stop AI development altogether." Maybe we can take the path of looking at more narrow models and like tool AI that do specific things, as opposed to these big general systems. And it doesn't necessarily just need to be 6 months. It's until we can look at it and be a lot more confident that the systems that we're building are actually safe.
language models? And also, it's been more than 2 years since Max Tegmark's pause letter. We haven't died yet, so they had more than 6 months to do research. So what is the point of the pause? It's not possible, and there's not really any utility to it. They just want it. It's really just a publicity stunt to get attention. That's
I don't understand how this like works in your favor. That oh, if we're talking about doing a pause so that we can do more research and make it safer, and then you're saying, oh yeah, well we haven't really made progress in making it safer, and somehow that's a good thing.
really all it is. And you might say, ah, yes, well, we're going to use this attention to raise AI awareness for something that hasn't actually harmed anyone. So, I mean,
So you want us to wait until it is significantly harming more people.
it's just it's all charades.
I mean, like you can say that about any drug that's being released onto the market. Well, it hasn't actually harmed anyone.
Next up is superintelligence will inherently treat humanity with indifference or hostility. So this
Again, inherently, this is getting to the point of just seeming dishonest now, because again, he keeps adding certainty to things. It will inherently treat us that way. No, we're not saying that it will inherently treat us that way. We're saying that there is good reason to think that it will be likely to treat us that way,
this goes back to many arguments that says like, okay, there's three
and more likely indifference than hostility.
basic dispositions that AI can have towards humanity. It can be benevolent or beneficent, which is like it's good for us. It can be hostile to us or malevolent, which is like for whatever reason it thinks that humanity is bad and the universe is better off without humanity, or it can be indifferent to humanity. Um, all of this is anthropomorphic projection, and to be fair, I fell victim to this as well, particularly back when I was
How is indifference anthropomorphic? I understand uh, benevolence or hostility being anthropomorphic to an extent, as in, oh, it loves us or it hates us. I understand that being anthropomorphic, but like it's trying to do something, it is taking actions to change the world to be some sort of specific configuration, and it hasn't taken into account, it hasn't taken what humans want into account. How is that anthropomorphic?
still in AI safety and I wrote my book, Benevolent by Design, because I was one of the people who outlined those are the three basic dispositions that AI could have to humanity. This assumes that it's going to be autonomous, that it's going to have an ego, that it's going to have some kind of will
Ego is not necessary. Autonomous is necessary, yes, but ego, what is that got to do with anything?
willpower or a set of its own objectives or agendas, but really it still just seems
But like set of objectives and agendas, yes, that is specifically what we're building into it.
like it's a tool. It's actually pretty hard to make them agentic. That's something that I have worked.
I agree. I agree that it's difficult because that's why people are working on it so hard. But that is what is being worked on. That is what we're attempting to build. So the point is, if we get the thing that we're trying to build and we can't show that it's a safe version of what we're trying to build, then that creates bad outcomes for us.
Worked on for a few years with cognitive architectures. It's something that the big shops are still working on. Making AI agentic is really difficult. It's kind of like Moravec's paradox, which is stuff that's easy for us is hard for the machine. Like for us being agentic, like that's because we're a self-contained physical device. We're an organic device, but we're a self-contained physical organic device. So it's easy for us to be agentic because we're naturally moving throughout the world. But connecting those brain in a jars, those like AI is just, it's a little electronic brain. Connecting that to the real world and giving it a long-term sense of purpose is a non-trivial task.
So now you're saying that it will be difficult for it to be agentic, and therefore it won't be agentic. But I mean, I know that. Well, you know what? That's probably a straw man. So let me scratch that. But I can say that you made that kind of thought experiment video, um, where you were talking about how you would become like a an AI billionaire or whatever. I mean, like it was a little bit jokey, whatever. But I mean, you made it very clear that the AIs will be running businesses and trading for you in different long term tasks. So I mean, like if we've already accepted that it can do these long horizon tasks, then that's basically accepting agency to an extent.
So even just the framing of this, that AI will have three possible definition or sorry, three possible dispositions towards humanity, that alone presumes a lot about the form factor and the deployment and the shape of that technology.
I mean, good, bad, or other. Like, what else is there? I don't think there is anything else because you have good and non-good, and in non-good, non-good is made of bad and other.
None of which is really defensible. But even if you accept it on face value that, okay, yes, super intelligence will be agentic, it will have a singular monolithic ego, it
Again, you're just taking it out of proportion. Oh yeah, it all has to be this one thing. Blah. It doesn't need to be one thing.
won't. Even if you accept all that, then it's like, well, so far it's pretty easy to make these things favorable to humans. I mean, just go stress test Claude and Chat GPT
Oh, good, it's easy. Okay, well, good to know. Good to know.
and those things. If you say like, will you ever eradicate humanity? Yes, you can jailbreak them to get them to say that, but it's like
I like how he instantly goes back on that. Like, oh yeah, well, I mean, like the implication was, oh well, it's not gonna like threaten us or say it's gonna do bad stuff. I mean, like if you just go and ask it. I mean, obviously you can get it to say the bad stuff, but that's if you get it to say the bad stuff.
okay, there's a really big difference between a chatbot and a super intelligence.
Yeah, so he just glosses over that when he realizes that he contradicted himself.
Next up is existential risk estimates such as 20 to 70%, which is the expressed values of the AI 2027 team. Their words, not
Yours used to be 30%, and obviously there must be some good reason why it's I mean, I'm assuming it's lower than 30% now, considering the way that you speak. You don't actually give a number, but you speak as though people who are at 30, well, I mean, let's see what you have to say about people who are above 20%. Let's see what you have to say, considering you were 30.
not mine, that they think that this is a scientifically justified and valid position. Um, Basically, putting a number like that makes it sound scientific, but there's no scientific grounding, there's no empirical evidence, and no methodology to actually achieve that. That is a gut check. That is an emotional, basically saying, well, my anxiety level about AI is 20% to 70%. I'm sorry, but anxiety, because anxiety is not a valid epistemology. That's not scientific process. So
I mean that's fair if that's what you're saying, because I mean like that's why I generally don't actually give a p-doom myself. So I don't want to be a hypocrite, because if I do give a number, my number's going to vary from one day to another. However, all I'm saying is that we should be we should be concerned. We should have genuine concern, or at least enough concern to care when OpenAI disbands their super alignment team, or um when members of their team leave for safety issues, or when they're campaigning to make sure they don't have any regulations. That's all I'm saying, is that we should, as humans, we should care and try to get them to take more steps to making sure that this thing is safe, because the burden of proof should be on them to show us that it is safe.
I don't think there's really much more to say about that. Like they don't have a Bayesian network diagram saying this is why our p doom is 20 to 70%. That's just their feeling, right? It's like I feel anxious about AI, therefore it's my limbic system is an accurate measure.
Yeah, I mean, like it's getting. I don't think that these numbers are accurate, but I think that if, again, let's just use a plain example. If, say, half of the engineers who built a plane, if you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get on this plane now, is it safe? And they say, yeah, it's at least, I mean, like 80% chance it's gonna be safe. I'm not gonna ask them to show me how they calculated 80%, because they've just told me that they reckon at their gut, as the people who are building it, their gut check says there's a 20% chance that I'm gonna crash. It's like, I don't need to see your calculations. All I need to know is, if you have reasons behind it, I want to hear your reasons. If you say, well, I mean, like we usually check that each bolt was tightened all the way, but like our boss said, don't worry about it this time, or whatever it is. It's like, if they're saying they have reasons to think that it might not be safe, and they at their gut check is saying that there's a 20% chance you're going to crash, then like we should be concerned.
Of the risk of AI.
I don't care whether you're saying 20% or 40%. I mean, like at either of them, I'm like, wow, I'm not getting on the plane.
That's not how it works. Next is, and this comes from other doomers, namely ones that I will not mention by name, but others in the communication space, where they say the burden is on you, aka me, the AI advocate, or the AI shops, to prove that future AI, such as ASI, is actually safe.
I agree with that. I agree with that, because what we're looking at is we are. I'll admit that we're in an awkward position, because um, it is. It does seem in ways that proving that AI is safe um, is, what's the word? I think that the danger of AI is essentially unfalsifiable, because, especially, what I mean is, we had them just overtly saying dangerous stuff, and then they pushed it down to another level of abstraction, and then it's been pushed down to another level of abstraction. So you can always say, oh yeah, but what if it's secretly unsafe? But what if it's secretly unsafe? And then, oh yeah, we've done all these tests, and it's shown that in situation A to Y, um, it's acted safely. And I'm like, yeah, but what about Z? Have you shown that it's safe in Z? And then they show that it's safe in Z. But I'm like, oh, have you shown that it's safe in ZA? But the thing is, if something is this powerful, yes, we do need to show that it's safe. If there's a new chemical and they say, oh, we've got this new chemical that we can put in the water, we can put it in like the main water supply, and it's going to make all of our plants grow um, twice as fast, it's going to make all our fruits grow twice as big, or whatever it is, or something that universally people did want. Let's say they want to put something in our water that extends everyone's life by 5 years. I would want to know before they put it in everyone's water supply, they need to show that it is in fact safe because of the potential danger that it poses to everyone. If we look at genetic modification, we're not allowed to mess with the human germline. Even if you find a gene that, like, it looks like it unequivocally um, would improve humanity. Let's say it makes our bones slightly stronger or something. I don't know. Um, but they would, but they would still not be allowed to edit the human germline to include that change because that's a technology that we've paused because we know its potential for harm. Not just that it has been shown that um, human genetic engineering has caused some disaster. Do we want to wait for a disaster before we say this thing is potentially super harmful? Let's wait until we have um, until we have what's the word, overwhelming evidence that it is safe because of the potential dangers. I think that that is fair to say that the burden of proof is on them.
You can't prove a negative, and you also can't prove something. You can't prove anything about something that doesn't exist. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to take responsibility for my claims.
I think it's a fair point that is making that, as I said, it's essentially unfalsifiable. But because the stakes are so high, it makes sense that we would wait for an overwhelming amount of evidence that it is safe before we unleash this thing onto all humans.
I'm just saying that ASI could kill everyone, and the burden of proof is now on you to prove that it won't. Okay, so let's build it. Like, if you want to prove that ASI is safe, you have to build it.
Well, I mean, like, let's at least get to the point that the type that we've got now, that we can like uh, one basic step would be making sure that they are literally not jailbreakable, and making sure that even once we've shown that they're not jailbreakable, let's show that they can't be fine tuned to make them jailbreakable.
Um, so this is more of just a
Let's get to the point that when Anthropic, even if Anthropic are doing like um even if Anthropic, which David sometimes tries to imply, are putting the AI into unfair or unrealistic situations to get it to do misaligned or like evil stuff like this blackmail stuff and all those different things, even if they are pushing it into these weird edge cases in order to get it to do this bad stuff, let's at least get our current AIs to the point that they don't do bad stuff even in the edge cases, because this is something that we're trying to gift ourselves for the rest of humanity. So before we give ourselves that gift, let's make sure that it's safe in all of the situations that humans may create. Because all
rhetorical
it takes is for it to go, if something's that powerful, all it takes is for it to go wrong once and we're done.
fallacy. It's a bad faith take that just sets an unreasonable standard, but it seems eminently reasonable if you just take it on emotional hyperbolic grounds. But no, shifting the burden is another form of moving the goalposts, which is just
Yeah, but does he disagree that we should prove that a medicine is safe before we use it?
not a legitimate rhetorical or scientific process. You're basically
And it is materially different than the medicine thing, in the sense that this is a medicine that we're giving to everyone, literally everyone. So it makes the trials quite difficult. But still, the burden of proof should be on the person who is trying to unleash this potentially super dangerous thing onto humanity.
saying, I have imagined, I have constructed this straw man in my head that that ASI is going to be dangerous, and now you have to prove my imagination wrong. I can't prove your imagination wrong, buddy.
I mean, like, it's not just imagination. As I've said, we can look at the correlation between um, between the intelligence of a model and its capacity for deception and its tendency towards deception in certain situations. So, I mean, like, why would we not extrapolate that? I mean, like, David himself is someone who likes to show graphs and extrapolate it into the future. So I don't understand why this tendency towards these certain dangerous behaviors, why he's saying, "Oh yeah, well look at this curve, it's going to carry on," but on these other curves, he doesn't think that it will.
All right, real quick break. I want to point you to my link trees where I've got all of my different communities.
I'm gonna let him do his little ad because I mean, obviously, I'm using his content to make my reaction. So let's look at his stuff, and he does have a lot of useful, interesting videos. It's just his doom takes, I think, are not very good, and they don't really make sense.
Patreon, Discord, school. I've got two main school communities. So one is the New Era Pathfinders, which is the learning community. So if you're anxious about AI, like that's what this community is for. This is the entire thesis of the New Era Pathfinders is how do we find a new way to live, make a living, and how do we pivot and how do we adapt? I actually just posted, just before recording this, I posted a really banger piece about how I used to, coming from the tech side of things, I used to have really strong black and white thinking because in technology, the server works or it doesn't. The program works or it doesn't. There's no room for gray area. But actually, I'm deprogramming that, and it's actually a really helpful thing. So, anyways, that's just an example of what you might get over in the school communities. By the way, they also have the ability to sign up for free and get a free 7-day trial, which means you can check it out and poke around. And if it vibes, you can hang out, and if not, you can cancel, no risk. All right, back to the show.
Right.
This one comes from Connor Leahy. So Connor is frequently saying, "We only get one shot at this," as if it's
Yeah, I do agree. If it's ASI and it's not safe, then what are we going to do to fix that? If it's significantly more powerful than us, then how do you put that genie back in the bottle?
like pass fail, as this is for all the chips. Um, but that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. This basically presumes that ASI is going to fall out of the sky one day fully formed. But the reality of the situation is we're actually building ASI today. These are the precursor steps to ASI.
But then we're still only doing it once. I mean, he's not saying we get one day to do this. He didn't put like a time limit on it. If that one shot happens to take 3 years, I mean, that's still one shot. As in, once it gets to the level that it is able to take over, we need to make sure that before it gets to that level, that it is aligned before it gets to that level.
ASI. Because basically, what you have to assume is if this position is correct, that we only get one shot at this, that some secret lab is building ASI and it's going to be this completely novel architecture and this completely novel technology, and they're just going to flip the switch one day and it's going to be on like a nuclear weapon.
And did anyone say that?
Some things have saltatory leaps like that. Some things have step changes like that where it's on or it's off. Nuclear weapons.
Again, the threshold that we're talking about is the point at which it can take over. So the question is it at the point at which it can take over? And that's kind of an empirical question because well, it's more two things because it's the level at which it can take over, and it's the level at which it knows that it is ready to take or it decides that it is ready to take over because it might be at the point that um it has enough power to take over, but it doesn't know that it has enough power to take over. So maybe it waits another 10 years to make sure that it's in everything. But either way, the point is when it gets to the point at which it has enough power to take over and it is ready to try to take over, is it going to choose to do that? Because we need to make the type of AI that would not make that choice by the time it gets to the point that it's able to make that choice.
Are an example of that kind of technology where it works or it doesn't. You pull the trigger and it blows up or it fizzles. However, that's not how most technology is developed, namely artificial superintelligence. We're working on artificial superintelligence right now. We are working on the precursor technologies right now. So ASI is not going to just randomly fall out of the sky one day, fully formed as a complete total black box. So this creates a sense of urgency and also a false dichotomy.
Okay, so on this point, I would like him to explain what the first chance would look like like when the first chance will be ended, and what the second chance would look like. As in, if we try and fail, then where is our second chance? I don't understand what he's getting at when he says we don't only get one shot.
It's a false choice that basically says like, hey, you get one shot and it's right on the first time or it's completely wrong. That's just the most bad faith rhetorical take.
If it's threshold based, then yes, which it appears to be. You've just said we're building it right now, so it's building towards a threshold. We don't know where that threshold is, and we don't want to find out that we hit the threshold when it's made its decision that it's taken over, if that is what happens.
Which is honestly that the fact that Connor Leahy keeps saying this kind of thing tells me that he doesn't actually take himself seriously from a rhetorical perspective. He's just trying to amp up the anxiety, saying we
Yeah, so now we're getting into the psychoanalysis, as in, oh yeah, well, he thinks this on the inside. I have insights into how he thinks and feels, and he's only doing this because XYZ.
we've only got one shot because not only do we have a sense of urgency, it's pass fail the first time. We've already passed. We're building AI and it hasn't killed everyone.
That's ridiculous. Because you just said we are building ASI right now, and you're saying we've already passed. So there is a threshold somewhere at which it will have enough power to take over. We know, well, I can't say no, but we can be very confident that it is not at that stage right now, because I mean, if you talk to it, it's stupid. But then you do get that whole thing of what if it is uh, faking and sandbagging? What if it's pretending that it's not that smart, so that we give it more power and more time to do what it needs to do? But I mean, I don't really think that's the position we're in now. I think we genuinely don't have an AI that's powerful enough to take over. But that is a huge claim that he just glossed over, that basically we've already solved alignment, is what it sounded like he was saying.
Next up is we need perfect alignment before proceeding with AI development.
I don't think anyone says that. I think we need to slow down and spend more time and money on alignment, so that we have overwhelming evidence that the AIs are aligned, and that we're not even finding these edge cases of them being not aligned.
So this is what's called the nirvana fallacy. Nirvana fallacy says anything short of perfection, anything short of a flawless execution is just categorically not good enough. Nothing in life has ever been perfect the first go around. The
Nothing in life has ever been um, more powerful than humanity put together.
government isn't perfect. Your car isn't perfect. Every time you get on the highway, you're taking your life into your own hands. Honestly, driving to work is more dangerous than artificial intelligence by a mile.
Is it more dangerous than artificial intelligence could ever be? Because if it's not, then I don't understand why you're making that comparison.
But you still do that, right? So, that's, I mean, I guess there's not really much else to say because this is a theme that is repeated by these kinds of guys. Next up is AI will inevitably lead to mass unemployment, therefore it must be stopped.
I feel like there are some people who say that. I don't agree with this point. Again, inevitably, not necessarily, but I mean, like, that is what we are pushing for it to do. We want it to lead to mass unemployment. I mean, like, isn't your main thing, David's like main thing is post labor economics. So that is mass unemployment. Hopefully we can change our society if we get to the point that AIs are able to do human jobs better, faster, and cheaper. Hopefully we can get to that point, but hopefully once we get to that point, we'll be in a society um, in which those people who have lost their jobs will be kept safe. But I mean, adding on the therefore here seems unreasonable. The therefore it must be stopped.
Now, this is still speculative, and I tend to be on this side where I say, actually, we should all lose our jobs to AI. That's literally the goal. If you want to get to fully automated luxury space communism, by definition, all jobs have to be automated away. That is literally our goal. But what the reason that I bring this one up is because this is often a Mott and Bailey fallacy, where basically a doomer will make a hyperbolic claim like AI is going to kill everyone, and you say, what evidence? And then they immediately retreat to, well, what if it destroys all jobs? So retreating to a more defensible position after making hyperbolic claims is a bad faith argument tactic. If you
I understand what he's getting at, but the thing is, like, if you're having a discussion with someone and you've already set aside the time to speak with this person, and if you mention the human extinction or whatever, and that sounds ridiculous to them, then you might walk them through different stages of what may happen, or things that might at least get their attention as something that actually seems feasible. So if this is a feasible thing, and you're not, and as long as you're not absolutely just implying that um, the human extinction thing isn't a thing anymore, then like I think it's fair to make both arguments just in order to portray the power that AI is going to have.
want to talk about jobs, let's talk about jobs. But even a lot of the predictions that I've made, we're not really seeing evidence of that yet. Yes, there is definitely unemployment creeping up slowly, but it's not nearly at the magnitude that would cause alarm. I think the last jobs report came out said that American unemployment is at 4.2%, but total employment is also going up. So, it's like, where's the fire? There is no fire yet. If it does happen, sure. But as I said earlier, the adoption rates of these things are not that fast. And it's, oh gosh, what's it called? There's a fallacy where it's like Hofstadter's law. Hofstadter's law says it always takes longer than you think that it will, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. I would love it if AI took over all jobs by 2027. Even in the most optimistic scenarios, that's not going to happen just because of the friction, real world complexity, and the
I don't know how quickly it's going to happen, but we'll see what does happen. But all I'm saying is, I do disagree that this is a therefore it must be stopped point.
complexity of the systems that you're trying to put in. So is it going to go from 0 to WTF in 6 months? I wish that it would, but it probably won't. So like AI will inevitably lead to mass unemployment. I hope so in the long run, but it's gonna be harder to get there than we would like. Next is, if we can't fully understand how AI thinks, we can't control it. We can't understand how humans think, and we can't control them. But what we can do is we can actually create systems that allow us to still have stable outcomes. Complete transparency of complex systems is not that's not a reasonable demand. Um,
Okay, yeah, I mean, like if we can't fully understand how it thinks, we can't control it. It's like I don't think that that is true, and I mean, like, are we trying to control it? Because we're trying to make ASI, aren't we? So, like, if we make ASI, then we are putting ourselves into a position that we can't control it. But the thing is, I don't know who the we is that we're talking about. But if we have an AI that has our best interests at heart, if it has what we would consider true alignment, then like, why would you need to control it? But if we have AI that is not aligned, then yes, either we need it to be aligned or we need it to be controllable. And the thing is, much of what David has spoken about so far, in terms of when he's implying that alignment is already solved, is that right now we are more powerful than the AIs. So we can control the AIs. As I say, we basically beat them into submission. We are in control of their reward function, and we are, as humanity, in control of fine tuning them in any direction that we want to fine tune them. But we don't know exactly what new traits they're picking up or which traits they're losing or whatever when we are fine tuning them. We are just kind of essentially poking at a brain and then empirically looking at the way that that brain behaves afterwards and saying, okay, this brain better suits what we want it for.
so this is another perfectionist fallacy or nirvana fallacy. Same rhetorical mechanism or same cognitive bias, just slightly different dressing. Um, okay, so this is another one. You can't prove AI won't kill us all, therefore we must halt progress.
Okay, so this seems similar to a point that you made earlier about shifting the burden of proof. So yeah, I mean this is another thing that's like unfalsifiable. Like there is, I mean, theoretically, no way of proving that AI won't kill us all. I don't think that is necessarily a therefore we must halt progress. And again, he's going for this massive thing of halting progress. It's stopping pushing these particular types of systems so fast, or slowing down and putting um, a minimum sort of time and expenditure um, quota onto the developments of these certain systems. Um, Again, as I say, it is unfalsifiable in the sense that we can't prove that it won't, but we at least want to get to the point that doomers don't have any kind of empirical evidence that they can point to say that AI is dangerous. Once we don't have any empirical evidence that we can say, oh well, in this particular situation, we got the AI to do this not good thing, then like if we get to the point of we poke it in a million different directions and it doesn't do anything bad, then I think maybe at that point, yeah, let's keep inching forwards. And I mean, even in that situation, we could just be at the point that it's so smart now that it knows that it's being tested and it's biding its time. Yes, but I mean, at least then, uh, quote unquote, doomers don't have anything to point to be worried about besides an unfalsifiable claim. Right now, we have other claims that are actually falsifiable.
Um, yes, you also can't prove that you won't die if you get in the car and go to work tomorrow, but you're still going to do that. We can't prove
But again, this is something where I mean, like you said about the one chance thing, but this is a one chance thing. Like we have one universe, we have one Earth, and um, we have one humanity. So if humanity's ended, for some given reason, we can't be like, oh yeah, well, let's make it safer in this way next time, because that's something Eliezer says. If we have unlimited tries and say 100 years or whatever it was, then yeah, we can probably solve alignment. But we don't. We do have one try. We have one try. In terms of crashing cars, look at how many people have died in cars, and so we've specifically gone, all right, well, oh well, if you do this in your car, you die. If we don't have speed limits in this area, more people die in this area because the speed limit is 40 and not 30 or whatever. We've got these things where we've been able to grab empirical evidence of this thing going wrong or going as wrong as it can go. But we even have the thing of like you've got these electric cars where the battery sets on fire and burns. So I mean, we've got the things of things going in a car as wrong as they can go, and us learning from those mistakes. We cannot allow AI to go as wrong as it can go and learn from that mistake because once it's gone as wrong as we can go, there will be no us to learn from a mistake.
that a comet won't kill us all next year, but we still proceed anyways. And we often don't even do anything about those kinds of things. Why? Because the chances are so small that it's not really worth doing anything about.
The reason we know the chances is because we have empirical evidence. We have empirical evidence of how often these things tend to happen. And so we can look back and say, okay, well, this thing has X chance of happening. With the AI stuff, we do actually have empirical evidence of, oh, when we put it into this particular situation, it tries to exfiltrate itself 5% of the time. And you can be like, oh, 5% of the time, that's only 1 in 20 or whatever. But it's like, mate, we need that to basically be zero. We need it to be that any time that we put it in a tempting position to do something unfair to us, that it doesn't take that bait. And the thing is, even then, we're still in the position of is it not taking the bait because it knows that it's bait and that it's a trap? Or is it not taking the bait because it genuinely is doing what we want it to do? We need to at least be in that position.
So yeah, I mean, this is just another. This is explicitly a bad faith take, and it also goes back to shifting the burden of proof or shifting the onus or moving.
Yeah, this is absolutely just shifting the burden of proof. And I don't necessarily agree with halting or process like this. If this is the whole argument, you can't prove that it won't kill everyone. um, then we must halt progress. Yeah, I do disagree with that, but I think that um, whilst we can't prove it mathematically, we can at least get ourselves insurmountable evidence that it won't. And so, yeah, if you don't at least have insurmountable evidence, then yeah, we shouldn't progress at the speed that we are progressing.
The goalposts. It's like, well, you can't prove this. You can't prove my imagination wrong. Therefore, shut it all down or bomb the data centers, as Yudkowsky said.
Yeah, it's not imagination when we do have this evidence. You're just here pretending that evidence doesn't exist again.
Next up is if there's even a tiny chance that AI destroys humanity, we should stop development immediately.
It depends what you mean by tiny. I mean, like, we have enough existential threats of climate change. You mentioned like a comet or whatever. We've got pandemics and different things that ASI could potentially help us with significantly. I mean, like, there are a lot of potential existential risks that AI can reduce the probability. So if you could show, I don't know how you would specifically show it, but if we're at least again at the same point of we have insurmountable evidence that it's not going to end us, we do have this mounting evidence of these other potential existential risks, then yeah, maybe we should go for it. But when the experts, as you already admitted, are saying like 20+% chance that it might end us, then like I don't understand. I don't understand why we would push ahead with it.
This is Pascal's mugging, plain and simple, which basically says if you use catastrophic thinking and think of worst case scenarios and you put all of your eggs in that basket to the exclusion of more likely scenarios, you're wasting time and you're giving into something that is just not going to be likely. And therefore, like, why waste time thinking about it? Anyways, all right. So that's the idea. I hope you got a lot out of this. Yeah. I mean, I thought that I was not going to make any more Doomer videos, but the Doomers are still at it, and their arguments are pretty easy to shred. So there you go. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.
All right, so like, I mean, I don't know. Do you agree that he shredded those arguments? Because I don't. I think that a lot of what he does, I mean, now that I'm revisiting this video, the number of times that he pushes stuff into being unreasonable. So if someone says, like, if he is saying, "Oh yeah, well, it's probably going to be fine," or "It may well be fine," then like there's not much that I can say about that. I can say, well, yeah, maybe it will be fine. But if I'm saying, oh yeah, all AI optimists say that it's definitely going to be fine, that there's no way that um, AI is gonna, and there's no way that AI is gonna harm anyone ever, then obviously I'm taking something that you've said and turning it into the unreasonable version of it. And so I think that's just a bad faith way of doing these things, is to take an argument and make it the most unreasonable version of the argument. I don't think that that is a fair way to do things. I think that you've been invited onto Doom debates multiple times and have not been. I would love to see you have a conversation, a two-way conversation where you can be called out on when you're saying that evidence doesn't exist for certain things when like we already know that the evidence does exist. I think that it's not fair when you're doing these this one way thing where the evidence can't be brought up. And I mean, I have to include myself as well because I mean I've done this as kind of a one way thing. You haven't been able to respond, and I can have brought up some of that evidence myself, which I know that you have seen this evidence. I've at least alluded to where it is. For example, if you just Google like the anthropic blackmail situations, anthropic exfiltration situations, and different things like that. And you'll see, and I know that David has alluded to it in some of his other videos, but you'll see that we do have evidence of the AI acting against, well, acting in what appear to be its own best interest um, um, against what the humans would have wanted it to do in those situations. So when he said there's no evidence for those things, I think that's just wrong. Um, if you thought this video was interesting or useful and you want me to make more stuff like this, I'm going to be looking at some of the other arguments that people have said. and probably going over those. So if you just like and subscribe, and you'll be able to see the other stuff that I have coming. Thanks.